Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. We're the biggest freewheeling live stream poetry podcast on the planet, in your ears and on your laptops. Our guest for episode number 334 is our Neil Postman Award for Metaphor winner this year, Nick Lantz. Really looking forward to talking about metaphor and all his great books coming up in a little bit. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, leave reviews on iTunes or Spotify or Amazon Music, I think is one of them. Wherever you're listening, whether it's live or after the fact, there's something you can do to help spread poetry around the world, and that is much appreciated and all we ask. So make sure you do that right now. Now, as we always do, we're going to start out with our Poets Respond poem, and we have two poets this week. We have a Sunday poem and a familiar face coming up with a bonus poem no one's read yet that's going to be live tomorrow. But first, let's go to Sunday's poem. And Beatrice Motamedi is here. Hey, Beatrice, it's great to see you. Yeah, thanks so much for being on the show. And really, this is one of those really powerful poems that... it based on a photograph. It's an ekphrastic poem, and based on a photograph you saw in the New York Times. Do you want to tell us about that? I'll show it on screen as you talk, but about why you were compelled to write this particular poem.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned the ekphrastic challenge because I discovered Rattle about a month ago, and I was looking through the different, sort of wells and ways that you can engage with Rattle. I think it's a marvelous journal, by the way, not just
Oh,
because you
thank you.
published this, but really, I was so happy to find it. So I found the ekphrastic challenge, and I was thinking about doing something, and I was reading past examples of things you've chosen, and then I was reading the Sunday New York Times, and I saw Arush Kamushi's photographs in a long piece about Iranians and how they're really juggling desire, hope, and the devastation of the country. And I saw the photo, which maybe you'll show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's on screen now for those watching. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So let me click to it myself just so I can be in it as well. And I just, I think a lot of people, I'm Iranian, but everybody I know, of every race, every ethnicity, even every political, persuasion, right, left and right, red and blue, we're all kind of looking for, these are turbulent times, and you look for the one small, meaningful act that you can do that makes you feel like you are doing something about the world around you. And this photo to me kind of screamed that message of someone who got up in the morning, was faced with devastation, and just went about his job.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, and for those just listening, this is a photo from Tehran, I believe,
it is.
where somebody is climbing a power line to fix the electricity with, in the background, just this massive wall of smoke from those fires from the oil infrastructure that was bombed. And so, going to work and doing this in the face of that is just something that amazes me. It's something I was thinking about a lot with the war in Ukraine. Where people, farmers in a field would be still working to make sure people have food to eat and survive, even as the drones and missiles are flying by. It's really incredible that we both have to live in a world this way, but that we do, and we survive and function too. And a really heroic effort there in that photograph.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. Well, you want to go ahead and read the poem?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Miracle, after a photograph by Arash Kamushi for the New York Times. The people need to get their power back. All of this anger is beside the point. So what else can he do but mount the joints of the electric pole that's still intact this morning, 3 steel cross arms at the top, a crucifix in concrete. Around him, loose wires dangle in leaden clouds of ash and soot, plus rain. He's used to rain. His tennis shoes seek pockets in the stone as he ascends. A safety rope tied to his belt reminds him of what's below. Now everything depends on him to generate what used to flow everywhere, in lamps and laptops and rice cookers, ventilators, freezers, and thermostats, water pumps, alarm clocks, fans, and chargers, emails, cell phones, and WhatsApp chats. Around him, oil and water mix with air. Who builds a girls' school on a Navy base? Who bombs that base when girls are playing there? A black rain falls. He rubs it off his face. Two things may be told, but you will not detect the truth between them, not when children die. What he can do is try to fix what's wrecked. He feels the weight of tools against his thigh, keeps climbing. How can one man push against such passion for destruction? All this debris should tempt him to surrender. It's immense, this apocalypse, this Gethsemane. Yet he is capable of miracles, running power lines, replacing circuits. For electricity is a magical necessity, like hope. You can't live without it. Mothers search the rubbles for their daughters. A husband texts his wife inside a van. The balconies are dark. There is no laughter. In London, someone's calling Isfahan. He stops. Up 50 feet or more, transfixed against an orange sun, he leans and pulls a wire to his chest. What happens next is anybody's guess. Yours, and mine, and ours.
Yeah, really so true at the end, too. That was Miracle by Beatrice Motamedi. Thanks so much for joining and sharing that poem. A really powerful testament to the times, which are what we're trying to do with Poet Responds. I really appreciate bringing that to life with poetry. Thanks so much for being here. Yeah, once again, that was Beatrice Motamedi with Miracle. That was Sunday's poem. And it's one of those times where there's so many poems being written, so many powerful poems. There was a lot to choose from. I couldn't pick just one. And we had a free opening on Tuesday, so I chose two. And a familiar face, Hayden Saunier, is here. Great to see you. Hayden back was the guest about a year ago, so it would have been episode maybe 380 or so if you scroll back. Hey, Hayden, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you again. And again, I think you were writing about the same thing. So tell us why, how this poem came to be.
Well, this poem is much more inward looking. I was, of course, in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, having trouble finding any kind of language to meet the moment. So this poem simply came about because I recognized my own process of trying to figure out what I was feeling. So it was really, I do yoga. This was my quieting practice, and it just was not working. And so I just followed that kind of interiorness and came to the poem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's a great contrast to the more narrative poem we just read about the same topic, though. Do you want to go ahead and read it?
Sure.
Okay.
Because war. I've been quieting myself with silence and breath, but a bell has been rung in the clock tower inside me. Or perhaps I am only the bell's reverberating shape, composed of crown, shoulder, waist, mouth, lip, sound bow, yoked to a headstock, and struck once, my tongue silent in a metal mouth. But I am not quieted. My body pounds with each breath, so perhaps I am the bricks too, and the knell that resounds without end, and also the knot in the rope just gone still.
Yeah, so beautiful extended metaphor there. Just great image for that poem, Because War. Hayden, it's always so good. I've always loved your work, and it's great to have you back on the show to share some of it. So thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing this one.
Yeah, well, that was Hayden Saunier, of course, and you can find Hayden back on that episode of the Rattlecast, about 280 or so. Also, this is going to be the poem of the day on rattle.com tomorrow. So if you don't get the poem of the day by email yet, just go to the bottom of any page, sign up for the poem of the day there. You'll get it in your inbox. It'll also be on the front page of Rattle all day Tuesday. on social media. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky. We're over there too, so follow us anywhere to get these poems because they are so important. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Nick Lantz. So sit tight and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Nick Lantz. Nick Lantz's poem Dolorimetry appeared in issue number 88 of Rattle and won the 2026 Neil Postman Award for Metaphor. He's the author of 5 collections of poetry, most recently The End of Everything and Everything That Comes After from the University of Wisconsin Press. His poetry has received several awards, including the Larry Levis Reading Prize, the Great Lakes College Association New Writer Award, and a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. He teaches in the MFA program right up the freeway from us, apparently, at Sam Houston State University, and lives in Huntsville, Texas, with his wife and cats. Here he is, Nick Lantz. Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Hey, it's great to see you.
Yeah, well, it's really wonderful to see you, and I have to say thank you so much for doing this one on short notice. I was going to schedule for later. Lisa Wells, the regularly scheduled guest who was a Rattle Poetry Prize finalist, had a family emergency, had to postpone that, and so now we get to have you instead, and it's a real treat because I love getting to know your work over the last few days, and loved your poem to start with, Dolorimetry. Maybe we should start out by just reading that poem, then we'll talk about it more. And this is the one that won the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor.
All right. Dolorimetry. A woman married a skull. He had a beautiful singing voice, but had never cleaned a toilet in his life. On her birthday, he bought a gold ring for himself. "You don't even have fingers," she cried. But at night he sang to her, and she always forgave him. She quit her office job and earned a living monetizing online videos of herself sobbing uncontrollably while making crafts. Dioramas of her childhood vacations in Colorado, an endless wool scarf the color of split pea soup. Once, she wrote a poem in hot glue in the flesh of her arm. She had many, many followers. Her husband, the skull, had invented a machine that measured how much pain a person could tolerate. He named the machine after his wife. "What?" he said as she sobbed. "It's a compliment." He sang while he ate dinner. They never had children. A colony of bees moved into the walls of their house. He refused to call an exterminator. The house was her job. But she liked to press her face to the thrum of the wall. So instead, she cut a secret hole where, at night, she could slip her hand into the hive and let them sting her just a little.
Yeah, so it's a powerful, surreal, extended metaphor all in one, a really fascinating poem. And, it's always really interesting choosing that every year. We've been doing the Neil Postman Award for about 15 years maybe, and you'd think that there'd be a lot of metaphors. We publish about 200 poems a year. You'd think that they'd just be loaded and it would be like, which one are we going to pick? There's so many. But actually, really great metaphors are not that common in poetry. And so we always end up with maybe a top dozen or so of real contenders. But then it's really fun, like figuring out, because as the award goes, it can be one single metaphor within a poem can win it, or it can be an entire extended metaphor like this one, which creates this whole world, which is a metaphorical world at the same time as it's sort of, on the edge of reality. And so I'm curious just to talk about metaphor in the first place. I mean, is that something you think about while you're writing poems, or do they? Because there's a way, it's named after Neil Postman because, Neil Postman recognized and talked about metaphor as being tools of understanding. And the way we actually function is in a metaphorical associative brain that we have. And so there's a way that metaphors can just sort of pop out on their own, but then they're so difficult to make fresh too. So I'm always curious, like how a winner of this award approached metaphor in the first place.
Well, I mean, I think metaphor is something that's really hard to engineer, to like sit down and think of like, okay, I want to make, here I have my subject, my tenor, and I want to have a vehicle for that, and I want to make a metaphor about that. And I often go to like the most literal thing when I try to sort of sit down and just kind of think my way towards kind of a metaphorical connection. And so I think for me, when metaphors are more successful is when I kind of blunder into them through experimentation. A lot of my poems I compose not as a sort of first thought, next thought kind of thing, but I do try to, sometimes I'll write multiple threads of something in different documents and then start kind of shuffling them together. And it's often kind of the chance coincidences or collisions that happen in that process where I think like, oh, these two things that I didn't plan to be connected at all make an interesting pairing. Because I think metaphor sits on that kind of knife's edge between recognition and surprise, right? Like it has to be recognizable enough that when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's true. That rings true for me. But at the same time, if you've anticipated the metaphor, if that's something that you've even remotely heard before, it's not very interesting, right? So it has to be sort of utterly new, but sort of instantly recognizable as true. And I just find it really hard to sort of force that to happen. It has to kind of happen sort of organically, like the molecules have to kind of jumble together and cling to each other in an organic way, and then I can sort of seize upon them and put them in the poem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of what happened here. I was playing around with some different folktale inspirations. There's a folktale about a girl who marries a skull, and I sort of took the title of that and ran with it. But then I was thinking a lot about sort of confessional art and sort of social media and like a very particular kind of sort of problematic man that is, I think very much discussed right now. And so like all of those things that were in kind of different threads of thought and different sort of word documents I was juggling around kind of came together in this one poem, not really by design, but sort of by accident. And then once I saw the connections there, I started to kind of cobble it together in a more purposeful way. But it didn't start out as a kind of purposeful joining of one idea to another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that writing process is so interesting. You can see it in the most recent book of yours and past work too that I was looking up. There's so much, there's a lot of mythology that comes in. There's politics. There's current events. There's pop culture. It's a real swirl of so many things coming together. And I'm curious. So this poem is not yet in a book. And I'm wondering, how are these characters recurring at all? Like how do you think about a poem like this becoming part of a larger collection later? Because it was really interesting to read, the leaps and the twists and turns of your most recent book.
Yeah. Well, with this poem and the other poems that will hopefully join it in the next book, I'm working a lot with kind of these archetypal figures of like the son, the wife, the politician, sort of taking these kind of archetypes that you might and treating them in a kind of like sort of folktale way, where I'm sort of telling a little story about them, but it's inflected in this hopefully more kind of surreal, poetic vein. And so, like in this sort of collection that's coming together, I have a series of poems that are all in the voice of Baba Yaga, who is this sort of witch of Slavic folklore, but also like a lot of other poems that are just sort of my own kind of fairy tale or folk tale inventions. And so I'm thinking about them sort of being grouped together in that way, and that like you could imagine them as like kind of bits of folk narrative just sort of filtered through the doom scroll of my brain. And so I think they sort of belong together in that sense. Hopefully, we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm hoping also they're a little different than sort of what I was doing through a lot of my last book. There's a long section in that book that is called Word of the Day, and it's these series of poems that are just kind of extemporized stream of consciousness kind of doom scrolls of just sort of daily life, mostly through like the pandemic and some health crises that I had. And so these feel to me very different from that now. I'm always trying book to book to do something a little different. I think probably to as someone other than me, they still just seem like my poems, but they feel very different to me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're gonna look at from the most recent book is a long sequence, and so I think we'll talk more before we go into that. And I'm curious just about your how you became a poet. I read somewhere I think that you were really into sort of science fiction and cryptids and things like that when you were younger. And
Yeah.
and I was too. I loved like Unsolved Mysteries, those shows. And there's something about the imagination that I don't know, that draws me anyway. And I wonder, what was it that drew you to poetry?
Well, I mean, I think there are like a few explanations of it. I grew up with artists. My mother is a photographer, and so I grew up with a like a dark room in our house, and so I like learned the process of like old like chemical photography as a kid, and so I think I always had a kind of photographic sensibility, a sort of way of looking at things that like my mother had trained me in. I think I always had, beyond just like the cryptozoology and stuff, I have just sort of like an obsession with sort of trivia and sort of just like odd bits of information that kind of stick in my brain. I can't remember the quadratic equation, but I can remember, facts about Loch Ness or something like that, right? Um, and then I think just some chance encounters with certain poets when I was in high school. In particular, the poet Richard Brautigan,
Hmm.
who wrote, I think most famously, Trout Fishing in America, but he wrote this book called The Pill versus the Spring Hill Mine Disaster, which is full of these kind of like surreal, kind of late beat poems written in San Francisco. And you're talking about metaphor. I remember the first book of his that I ever encountered, I was like 15 years old. I was in a flea market in Berkeley, California, and I pulled it out of like a box of books and opened to this page. And I remember the whole poem. The poem is called I Feel Horrible. And it's I feel horrible, she doesn't. And I walk around all day feeling like a sewing machine that's just finished sewing a turd to a garbage can lid, which I was 15 in my defense, but I thought that I didn't know that you could do that in a poem. I thought,
Mhm.
Poetry was, Shakespeare and Milton and things like that. And so that kind of sort of opened me up to the possibilities of what I could do. And then, that was an identity that no one in my friend group had seized upon yet. They were in bands or on sports teams. And so I'm just going to be the poet. And so I started reading books of poetry and going to poetry readings and walking around with a notebook that I scribbled terrible poems in every day, in high school. And, it just sort of became part of my life from there.
Yeah, yeah. How did you develop the style of poetry that you have? I think in one interview you described trying to create a provisional reality was the phrase that you used, and having that edge between like what's real and not quite real. It's very similar to what you're talking about with a metaphor, more
Mhm.
broadly or more specifically, where it's like has to be both true but like odd enough at the same time, and that seems to be the thread that connects your poetic imagination. is having like trying to walk that line of provisional reality. And so when was it that you discovered that was the direction of your voice? I guess there's so much talk about voice, and what we want to do as a poet, and so that's always an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the poems I write, when I am writing something sort of inspired by, contemporary events or politics or, just something that's happening in the news, I'll often try to write about it in a way that, if someone reads the poem 20 or 30 years from now and that like little pop cultural blip has gone away, that they don't really need to know about it, right? Like that it sort of becomes its own sort of thing within the poem. It's sort of just own little weird detail, and becomes part of just like the sort of surreal fabric of whatever reality the poem is trying to kind of bring into existence. Um, I think that poems can create sort of realities that are more sort of vivid or meaningful than the ones we walk around in every day, or at least they can feel that way. They sort of bring to life that which we don't often notice. I think that's one of the things that's often exciting to me about poetry. I had a line about corn in my first book, and Linda Gregerson, who wrote the introduction for that book, she'd sort of picked it for the prize that it won. She said she would never think about corn the same way again. I took that to be the greatest compliment, right? Because it was, take this sort of thing that I'd, seen a million times and just sort of like transform it, turn it just a little bit so that you'll never think about it the same way again because its reality's been altered. And I think poems have the ability to sort of go into our brains and just kind of like frame shift the way we see things in a very sort of permanent fashion that is small, but also sort of weirdly powerful. And I just enjoy the process of that. I mean, I'm often writing for myself to surprise myself, to make myself think about something in a new way, or to sort of render nonsensical something that sort of makes a problematic kind of sense, or to sort of wrest some sense from something that doesn't seem to make any sense, just to kind of like frame shift my experience of the world a little bit, right? To sort of break myself out of whatever pattern of seeing that I've been stuck in.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Let's read one of the poems, the first from this series that you'd sent us from the most recent book.
Yeah. So this is a series. It's called After Aeschylus, and it's a series of quasi sonnets. I say with sort of heavy quote marks. And they're framed by this epigraph from it's a fragment from the papyri of Aeschylus that I've sort of paraphrased here. And that fragment is: the eagle, struck by an arrow, looks down and recognizes its own feathers fletching the shaft. And the first poem in the series is photo of Monet's haystacks with the back of a tourist's head in the foreground. Who's to say? Some Roman traveler, dead now thousands of years, carved this in the tomb of Ramses VI. I visited and did not like anything except the sarcophagus. Monet walks into a field with an easel tucked under his arm, and there goes the neighborhood. Now a sorrow of tourists floats the gallery, snapping blurry pics of haystacks. Meanwhile, the office park's bucolic brook sounds like God riffling a stack of 20s, but water recognizes water. Just like Heather in HR sees her own face catching shafts of sunset in the break room poster's dusty glass, Parsippany's light falling on Giverny's just so. The calligrapher inks the character for mouse with a mouse whisker brush. Who are we to complain? Even the handle of the axe comes from the forest.
Yeah, so you see the leaping twists and turns of surprise that come in that first poem from the series. And you can see that sense of provisional reality and having things be slightly distorted, exaggerated. What makes a poem believable even when you have those elements, because that's one of the things, you have to be reading along and absorbing the world that you're sort of entering, and like being convinced that it's real, even as somebody marries a skull and there are bees in the wall and all that stuff. So what is the key to selling a strange reality?
I mean, I think some of it just comes down to like sort of directness and confidence of voice, right? Like I think if you sort of hedge about and like hem and haw about what you're trying to establish, that's never going to work. But if you start the poem, a boy was born and he was purple, right? Like if you just like give it to us straight, like just sort of state it outright and assert it, it becomes sort of, the reality of the poem. I think humor goes a long way as well, towards sort of winning the audience over. I hope that's sort of what happens at the beginning of this poem, because this is an actual bit of Roman graffiti in an Egyptian tomb that a Roman tourist visited this tomb of a dead pharaoh and carved, "I visited and did not like anything except the sarcophagus," in Latin, presumably. Which I think is so funny because it's exactly what someone would write on Yelp today. And I hope that sort of odd bit of humor will help sort of pull the reader along into the sort of very meandering path that the poem takes, because it does take some sort of switches in time and place that are pretty abrupt. Yeah, and it's the some of the other stuff like Heather in HR, in Parsippany, like she's made up, right? I don't know her, but as you say, I'm trying to kind of like fabricate a reality here, and so starting with something that seems too weird to be true but is true, and then sort of working my way around to something that seems like it could be true but is just made up. Um, Blending those things together. I don't want to say that I hope it confuses the reader about what's true or what's not. But like again, sort of hopefully entices them, sort of seduces them into the sort of possibility that this might all be real.
Yeah, well, there's so much play involved in it, and whenever an artist is playing with their medium, the joy of that comes through no matter, which direction, and how emotionally fraught it might be. There's something about just the freedom of play and experimenting and pushing yourself and surprising yourself that always is compelling, I think. Let's read the next poem, Birds of a Feather.
Okay. All right. Birds of a Feather. This one has an epigraph from Michael the Macaw, which is an animatronic bird in Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. Be careful, me fine friends. The gods have been angered by all this celebrating. I'm sweating on a bench in Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, thinking about how Imagineers programmed the birds whistle and clatter with the same tech that ran the Polaris missiles, weapons designed for their counter-value. That is, imagined to unimagine whole cities. Call it feeble luck that we've survived our own history so far. But someone must build the gallows, we told ourselves, as we put hammer to nail, then put town in our rear view before the hangings began. Every tool recognizes its own duty, the sheath its complicity, the knife its insight. We're the ones who pretend, fleshing the past in song and the piped-in scent of popcorn. Meanwhile, our clockwork cranks itself. The automatic doors swing wide for the stray dog wandering in from our ruin, the radioactive dust on his coat an enchantment, his sores and bleeding gums shiny as our imagination.
Yeah, so you can see just the mix, the huge potpourri of different moods and facts and attitudes and and emotions that go into these poems. I imagine it just seems like you read a lot too. There's a huge, there's always a bookshelf behind, well, not always, but often there's a bookshelf behind poets. There's a particularly big one. And it feels like reading your poems that you read a lot. Is that the source of a lot of stuff? Is that advice that you would give to read a lot and take notes, I imagine?
Yeah. when I teach my intro poetry classes here at my university, one of the things I do is on the first day I give students these little like notebooks. They're like little pocket-sized notebooks, and everyone gets one, and they're these bright little colors. And their job is to write down one detail every day, right? And then at the beginning of the week, we have sort of detail sharing where we just go around the room and everyone reads one of their details from the week. And I find it is just so transformative in terms of getting them to think about like the world around them as fodder for poetry. Because I think so many students come into a poetry classroom and with very loaded preconceptions of what a poem is supposed to be, how you're supposed to write a poem, how you're supposed to think about with, sort of great seriousness and gravity what a poem is. And, it can be like, no, it can be that thing you overheard your roommate saying on Saturday night. It can be one of those little Grubhub delivery robots that's like winding its way around the campus, and you just had a pang of sadness seeing it get stuck in a ditch. And that stuck with you, right? And if you write those things down, you start to realize like, oh, all of these could be poems or parts of a poem. And so, well, I do think people should read and should read a lot. And, I think often some of my best ideas or the ideas I'm most excited about in my poems don't come from reading poetry. They come from reading other things. They come from reading the news, or they just come from seeing things, all around me. I have a poem in the book, that was just inspired by a pawn shop sign that, it's used to said, "We buy gold," but the U and the Y had fallen off of buy, and so it said, "We be gold." And I just loved that so much, that, I wrote a poem based on it, right? So I think it's about sort of keeping your sort of mind open to all the weird little things that are around you and sort of recording them either mentally or physically in some way, so that you can come back to them, revisit them later, and discover the way they connect with each other and the way they've connected with you. Because it's very easy to just sort of notice something and then sort of let it go. There's another poem in the book that mentions an anecdote. My wife and I were driving from campus back home, and we passed a gas station, and there was a dead horse in the gas station, like on its back, legs up.
Oh, wow.
Weirdest thing, like clearly it had had like a heart attack in its trailer or something like that, and they'd pulled over. And then we were driving home, and we had to check the mail, and like something came up, and I'd been home for like an hour and a half, and I'd forgotten about the dead horse, right? Like this totally weird thing that I'd seen. And so I think part of it is just sort of making sure you don't forget the things you notice. Because I think we notice a lot more than we always give ourselves credit for. So yeah, that's
Yeah, definitely. And do you keep a journal of those things? Like your students do? You have your own?
I keep several because I'm very
Uh-huh.
bad at keeping one, and so I have just like sort of notebooks everywhere. I've got a couple in my office. I've got some at my house. I've got
Hmm.
one in my bag. I'm not good at using like the notes app on my phone or anything like that. I will use it in a pinch, but I like to write things down. So usually if I go to write poems, I have to kind of gather up the various notebooks and then sort of flip through them and find the details that I like.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, there's several notebooks scattered all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's sort of multiple things that make poetry really valuable, but beyond just the sharing of poetry, which of course is. But that's first of all, there's a psychological effect of having yourself be more in unison, which we talk about very often here. But also just the thing that you're doing with those notebooks and what haiku poets are doing when they're writing daily haiku on walks all the time is noticing the world more and noticing your life and using that as a tool to not only pay attention but appreciate what you're attending to,
Mhm.
and so it seems like that is a great source of inspiration, I guess I'd say. um, let's see, let's read another poem. The next one from the series is 15
15
acres.
acres.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Uh, 15 acres. A seer tells King Oleg his horse will kill him. So Oleg kills the horse. Years later, he comes across the bones in a field and laughs. Stupid horse. Dead horse. Ha! Oh, America, I'm tired of personifying you. Take this hill of ants, this heart like a diesel truck idling in the drive-through, this dead guard dog named Pharaoh. Yes, I've studied art. The politician's textbook frown after every school shooting, the fires. Even an ant recognizes itself in a mirror, and hell has its own weather, its own beachfront gift shops where we smooth our sweaty bills on the counter. The NRA says its annual convention this year features 15 acres of guns. And did you guess how it ends? How Oleg's laughter echoes like hammers over the fields of his wide domain. How he kicks the horse's skull. How a snake crawls out.
Yeah, another fascinating one. That's 15 Acres from Nick Lantz and his most recent book. I have to pull up the title again. Sorry. It's The End of Everything and Everything That Comes After That. It's always with the longer titles. It's hard to keep them straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is a book that deals with so many things. There's a cancer diagnosis going on. There's the pandemic. There's climate change. There's the politics that we've all been living through. It's this swirl of things that are sort of feel like the end of everything, even though we keep going, which I think is what the title is alluding to. How did you figure out how to piece this collection together with so many disparate topics? It feels like there's so many threads. It's like a difficult tapestry to weave.
Yeah. I mean, it started out many years ago as a very different book. And, I would sort of write, 20 or 30 pages, and then like the sort of trajectory of the poems would change a little bit, and so I'd discard the poems that didn't fit anymore, and then write some more, and then it would change again. At one point it was mostly ekphrastic poems. At one point it was mostly poems about ghosts. So it's a real kind of ship of Theseus at this point, that it bears very little resemblance to what it started out as. I think I sort of settled on the idea that's sort of represented in the title. In particular, I'd sort of the first year or so of the pandemic, I hadn't written a single poem. I just really stopped. I kind of spun off into kind of a depression, kind of constant sort of anxious mania. And, I started writing poems again after about a year and a half of that. And at that point, it did start to kind of come together for me around this idea of, something terrible can happen to you, and you have to go to the grocery store the next day and buy paper towels, right? Mm-hmm. Like the sort of world goes on in these million kind of mundane ways, even as, the kind of norms of society feel like they're crumbling around you, even as your own body can be failing you in any number of ways. The people around you are not the community you thought they were. All of these things can sort of like shatter and break apart, but you still have to go on. And I was actually thinking of Beatrice's poem about the linemen in Iran up on that power line. The world is burning around him, but he's got to get up on that line and fix the power. So I think that's one of the big things that sort of the book came together when I sort of had that kind of revelation that a lot of the poems were sort of headed in that direction. And it's also like this sequence of poems, I think, is about the sort of secondary emphasis that the sort of our downfall or our deliverance often comes from within us, not from some exterior force, right? In the fragment from Aeschylus, the eagle is struck by an arrow fletched with its own feathers, right? The handle of the axe comes from the forest. In this case, Oleg is the sort of architect of his own demise. He said, he's going to get rid of the horse because he's told it's going to kill him, and in the end, it's his killing the horse that leads to him dying from the snake bite, right? Mm-hmm. So, in this particular poem, I was thinking about that very explicitly, obviously, in terms of like our gun culture in this country and our sort of fascination and obsession with guns and our inability to kind of let go of them, even when they are constantly causing us so much suffering. But I was thinking about that same kind of phenomenon on a number of levels, like, with my own body and like going through cancer treatment, like, the sort of the enemy is within, right? Like it's your own cells sort of multiplying out of control, and it's your neighbors who are making terrible political decisions that have disastrous effects for the whole country, and it's the killer is inside the house all the time is sort of what it feels like, and so that's sort of what I was thinking of. But on the flip side, that no one's coming to save us either, so the solution is sort of within us as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, layers and layers of metaphor for sure. I think it's a good framework to read the next poem too. Think about it in those terms might be helpful for cartoon metaphysics. Do you want to read that?
Sure. Yeah. Cartoon metaphysics. I dove into a swimming pool full of gold coins and broke both legs, but hey, that's late capitalism for you. So now here I am, pouring birdseed in the middle of this huge red bullseye painted on the road, expecting what exactly? Let's not speak of the tornado, the steeple plucked from its church, birds pecking out the scarecrow's straw for their nests. Yes, I've worn the crooked crown of bluebirds chirping bright doom, but no one recognizes he's run off the cliff's edge until he looks down. Better I go on dangling anvils, piling up TNT, sketching the last outlines of my failure. The first coyote I ever saw was pawing at cold fries in a parking lot. Beep, beep went the cars. And that bullseye, it throbs all night long above the building where my wife and I convince ourselves that our sadness is the exact size and shape of a credenza.
Yeah, those cartoon metaphysics.
Yeah. I mean, I was raised on Looney Tunes, so.
Yeah. You mentioned not writing for a year and a half or so.
Yeah.
And it is, once you stop writing, it's so easy to continue not writing. It's like you start to think, oh, why did I bother doing this? Like I don't need to be going through this mental anguish of staring at a blank page and then getting mad at myself because I'm not doing it the right way. And it's just easier and easier to not do it. And so first of all, what was it that pulled you back from that abyss of not writing? Was there anything that you managed to help pull yourself up by?
I mean, part of it was just like self-castigation because like, like you're a poet, write some goddamn poems, right? I was very upset with myself. But that doesn't usually help. No, I went, I traveled for the first time. The pandemic had been going on for a while, but like, travel restrictions were lifting. And I went and I visited my mother who had moved in with my grandmother on the family farm. My mother had sort of retired a little earlier than expected to go and take care of my grandmother whose health was failing. And so I wanted to see my grandmother before she passed and to see my mother who I hadn't seen in a while. And, I sort of got out of the sort of bubble I was in, and I think that was part of it. Like in a pandemic, I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't really doing anything that wasn't on a screen. And so, I got out and I saw weird things again, and I thought, I've got to write a poem about this, right? And it was something really depressing. But it was, it got me excited, right? Like I saw this and I had that moment of like, oh, that's a poem, right? I saw a thing. I said, that's a poem that meant something to me, that like tweaked my perspective, that made me think or feel something new. And it was just the sort of excitement of that kind of got me back into it. The other thing I think was I was very hung up on writing poems in a particular way. Most of the time when I write poems, it is a very kind of like fussy, fidgety kind of thing. Like I'm putting together a puzzle out of pieces that weren't designed to make a puzzle together. That's sort of how I think about writing poems. And so it's a lot of me just like fiddling little pieces around and working this line this way and that. And I think I mentioned this in one of the poems in the book. It felt very much like washing your car in the middle of a forest fire. It felt way too sort of fussy for the kind of life I was experiencing at the time, which was very like chaotic and overwhelming. And so I wrote this long series of poems in the middle of the book called Word of the Day, that they're these kind of stream of consciousness poems. And with those ones, I just resolved I'm going to write them start to finish. And I just sort of wrote them line by line. I didn't edit them hardly at all. I didn't punctuate them. I tried to be almost kind of anti-poetic in some of the language, very like deliberately flat. Like I'm not going to try to dress this up in sort of any kind of meter or rhyme or anything like that. And if the poem doesn't work, I'll just throw it away and I'll write a million of these and just keep the ones that work. And that was really liberating for me to kind of let go of some of the sort of trappings, the kind of fastidiousness with which I often sort of write poetry. So that was very liberating for me too, and helped me kind of get over the hurdle of not writing.
Mhm.
Because I think with any sort of discipline, whether it's like, exercise or taking care of plants or whatever you're doing, you have to figure out a way to sort of grease the skids as much as you can, right? Like
Mhm.
you can't sort of have more obstacles in the way of it than you need to, if it's something that you're struggling to do. And so I just tried to remove some of my own aesthetic obstacles to just get some poems on the page, and
Mhm.
that's to do the trick.
Yeah, well, really good advice. I should say at this point, if everybody's enjoying this conversation, do make sure you click the like button. We always have, twice as many people watching live as have clicked like at this point. And if I say it, more people will click, and then it'll be shared to more people in the future. So make sure you click like if you haven't yet. And also, if you have any questions for Nick, please do pass them along in the chat window, especially on YouTube. That's the one I watch the most. Helps, like Laura just did, put question all in bold so I can see it as I'm scrolling up. But I'll pass any questions along that you have as well. But let's first hear the next poem, Nick. Deer Hoof Gun Rack.
All right. Deerhoof Gunrack. This one has a little epigraph from the Roman poet Catullus. And let it go badly for you, shadows of hell who devour all beautiful things. The old midden mounds are full of fish hooks carved from the bones of fish, just as shopping malls are full of old midden mounds and bad analogies. On further inspection, all the art I've ever loved boils down to people suck, but like Judith's steady sword hand or the sparrow on Lesbia's lap, the way its tiny claws hook her gown as it chirps to her. On your man cave wall, two upturned hooves recognize that hell keeps its own ledger of questionable debts, just as Gentileschi's brush keeps Judith's sword sharp, just as Catullus's poem holds the dead sparrow, his lover's grief. I hate to joke of it, but I adore Catullus's butt, that curse flung against indifferent darkness, the shape of a belief, the way the hooves believe that if they just hold your gun for long enough, one day you'll take it down from the wall and blow your brains out.
Hmm.
That one's a
Yeah.
little dark at the
Well,
end, I gotta say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a Deer Hoof Gun Rack
yeah,
by Nick Lantz from his book, The End of Everything and Everything That Comes After That. Um, so one of the things that I've been thinking about reading your work is that you do talk so much about politics and history and mythology, and yet there's this like dance you have with that lyric eye too, where it's sort of you enter, but again it's you walk these lines, I guess, is what with all things between real and slightly not real, and between making sense and not making sense, and you do on the personal level too. And wondering what you think about walking that line, and how you manage that, and sort of why you fall where you do between the two poles, I guess.
yeah. I mean, I think when I'm thinking about sort of like the lyric I or my own sort of persona, the version of Nick Lantz that sort of speaks in the poems, I have a pretty loose sense of like, factual reality when it comes to the poems. Like there are some things certainly that like I want to tell the truth about, like kind of lowercase t truth. Like, if I'm writing about my, experience going through cancer treatment, like, I had cancer, right? That actually happened. But I'm not above like tweaking the details of like a particular episode. There's a poem in the book where I'm kind of unkind to someone in the midst of my treatment. I kind of like lash out at them when they're trying to take care of me, and like that didn't really happen, but it was more interesting for the poem if it did. Um, you know, uh, my wife often complains that I don't write a lot of poems about her. I've only written like a few poems in which she has like kind of featured directly. And I always tell her the reason is because, to make the poem interesting, I would have to mess up our relationship in some way, right? That like we're too healthy together to make for interesting poetry, so we would have to have an argument in the poem that didn't actually happen. And I have done that a couple of times where, poem me and poem Vicky have had arguments that never happened in the real world because that was just more interesting for the poem. My undergraduate poetry professor is a really interesting guy named Vern Ratsala, um, who he said to us at one point, and I don't know if he was quoting someone else or if this was his own little adage, but he said, if you're writing love poems, you have to decide if you're loyal to the love or to the poem, right? And the thing that makes a love poem, compelling to the person you give it to is not going to really make it very compelling to other people who might read it most of the time. And the things that would make it interesting to other people who might read it are not going to make it a fun poem for, the person you love to receive. Because, interesting poems are about ambivalence and messiness and conflict. And that's not usually what someone wants to get in a love poem, right? And I don't know, I imagine a lot of poets have experienced this where they may get asked to write like a poem for a wedding or a funeral or something like that, or asked to supply one. My mother will sometimes ask me to supply a poem for an event or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I don't think you want to read at this event the kind of poem I would write, right? So I think sort of my sense of like what's interesting in the poem is not always the thing that's going to be appealing to the person connected to it, if that makes sense. Um, and so I do try to kind of dial up sort of like my own persona in the poems, because that's me, and I feel like I can sort of tweak the reality of my voice and my life because it's mine. I don't feel as comfortable doing that with other people. So
Mhm.
that's why my wife is my oh
Yeah, well, that definitely makes sense. A good cover too.
yeah yeah.
um, so the next poem is the Waffle House Index. Do you want to read that, and then we'll do some of the
Sure,
questions from the audience? Yeah.
sure, sounds great. Waffle House Index. This has a little explanatory note here that this is an informal metric used by FEMA to gauge disaster severity. In ancient Babylon, they tied three answers to three arrows, and whichever flew farthest told the truth. Today I shopped online for face masks for my cats. If Waffle House stays open, will the armed gunmen parading the Capitol fly away like angry birds? Will the medieval muck serfs walked in stop sticking to our shoes? Will the wheelbarrow of dead bodies cease its rattle? The word we makes a crooked sound when we talk disaster, but please recognize that every apocalypse requires its own measure of ruin. Ours just happens to be pan-fried. Others read dust, placenta, barley, the melting of wax, needles, cracks in a burning donkey's skull, comet tails, even, don't laugh, poetry. The trick is, you only get a stone's answer from a stone. You shuffled the deck. You ordered hash browns all the way. To the executioner, the word hope just sounds like rope.
Yeah, really cool poem. That was the Waffle House Index, the last we're going to share from that series from Nick Lantz's most recent book. So going to the questions, Laura Berg wanted to know, would you consider yourself a tragic poet in the grand sense?
Like the sort of Keatsian sense that I'm gonna get like a bad review and like sort of go get develop like the vapors and die or something like that.
I don't
No,
know. All I
probably
can do
not.
is read the
Yeah,
question. I'm
yeah, no,
curious.
no, no.
There's a way that poetry is all tragic,
Yeah, yeah.
So it's fascinating.
I've been talking about my mother a lot in this interview, weirdly, which I didn't expect. I don't often talk about her, but she for a long time kept a collection of bird nests that she'd find, and she wouldn't take them out of trees. These would be bird nests that like fell out of trees, and she would find them, and sometimes there'd be broken eggs inside, and she would she had a shelf she kept them on. Um, And she's also the kind of person, I think I mentioned she's a photographer. If we're out together and she sees a dead animal, she will take a photo of it, right? And so I think again that was part of my own kind of artistic training is like notice the messed up thing first, right? Like that's the first thing my attention goes to. Like, you see the broken window first, you see um, the baby bird that fell out of the nest on the sidewalk, that kind of thing. So I think, and you can probably get this from the poems I've been reading, that I do have a kind of um, grim sensibility sometimes that I often gravitate towards or want to wrestle with the things that are sort of most unpleasant or most disturbing, at least the ones that occur to me. Um, and sometimes to treat them with humor, sometimes to treat them with tenderness, sometimes to treat them with just fear and terror. But yeah, I think I often am drawn to I don't want to say the morbid, but the conflicted, the tragic. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Hmm. Yeah, and another question, John Arthur wanted to know about this phrase "provisional reality." Is just a really cool way to think about what we're doing as poets. And John Arthur says, what other poets do you think do the best job of creating and inhabiting a provisional reality?
That's interesting. Um, I mean, I really like what maybe Dean Young does with a lot of his poems that have a more kind of surreal bent to them, the way he kind of spins a world out of just like these sort of strange turns of voice and uh, just unexpected imagery. I think that's someone I think I would sort of point to right away, and I really any of his books. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of the thing that I always wonder about is, when I'm reading a poet's book, like, I don't know necessarily how much of the reality is provisional and how much of it is, factual, right? Sometimes that's more obvious with some poets than others. But yeah, I think Dean Young's a great example of
Mm-hmm.
that kind of poet for
Yeah,
me.
it's really interesting because there's an assumption of truth. I think the first thing until we give like the benefit of the doubt to things, even though they're works of the imagination.
Mhm.
We sort of assume when we read stuff that the I in the poem is the poet, and this stuff really happened. And there's a way that we get disappointed too when we find out that that's not the case, even though that the real interesting, fascinating stuff comes from this blending and merging of that. Do you ever come across things like that where people are disappointed with
Oh,
things not being
I
real?
yeah, I can give you an example of that. In my first book, we don't know, there's a poem called Of the Parrot and Other Birds That Can Speak. And the title of that poem and its epigraph come from a 16th century, 17th century translation of Pliny's Natural History. Pliny the Elder was this sort of Roman historian, natural historian, and he wrote the Natural History, which is full of stuff that is just absolute BS, right? Like he got some of it right, but like he reports on some things that are just like total BS. And one of the lines in there is it's really great. He's talking about like birds that can be trained to speak, and he says that some have died for very anger and grief that they could not learn to pronounce some hard words, which I want to be true because that's so kind of like beautiful. The idea that these birds were like dying of grief because they couldn't like articulate language in the way we do. But that poem is it's written in the second person, and I very deliberately wrote it in the second person. At the time, I was working as a copy editor, and I'd been copy editing some medical journals about like sort of geriatric nursing and geriatric care. And so I'd been reading a lot of these scientific articles about dementia. And I was at the time also obsessed with parrots and sort of talking parrots. And so this thing sort of came together in this poem. And the poem describes the you of the poem, the addressee, um, sort of gifting their mother, who is starting to go through dementia, with this parrot to keep her company. And like the parrot, and the mother start to kind of collaborate on some mischief. And part of it's funny, but like as the poem goes on, it's clear that the mother's mind is deteriorating. And at the end, the mother dies, and the person in the poem is taking the parrot back to their house with them, and they've got it strapped in the car with them in its cage, and it starts speaking in the mother's voice because it's learned to imitate her. And it's entirely fictional, entirely fictional. And I wrote it in the second person because it felt so fictional that I did not want people to think that it was about me. But nevertheless, I got a few emails from people sort of commiserating with me, like saying, like, very vulnerable emails, people saying, like, I went through a similar thing with my mother or my father when they had, dementia or Alzheimer's, and I had to write back and say, I'm so glad you engaged with this poem and that it meant something to you. Like, you should know that it is fictional and that it is not about anything that happened to me. Um, People were okay about it, but you could tell that I don't think they necessarily felt misled, but um, I think they wanted to believe it was like factually true and factually about me, and it wasn't. So
Mhm.
that's definitely happened to me before. Um,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That. Oh, I want to believe. Is that from the X Files or something?
mhm. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Well, let's see. One more question, and then we'll do the last poem. Mark Grenier want to know. He says, "I noticed many epigraphs here. Why and how do they inform the poems usually?" And I'll tie that too with titles because there's an interesting way, I guess, how you use them. Seems like to me they relate. So how do you approach the epigraph and the title, and how do you pick them and why?
sure. I would say that probably mm, like maybe half of my poems could have had an epigraph, but I usually omit it, right? I'm often working with sort of outside sources, for lack of a better word, like bits of text or references that inspired me. And I think generally speaking, there's an unvoiced epigraph to a lot of my poems, like some little thing that triggered the poem, right? Or that I'm writing in response to. And I guess in some cases, I feel like the reader needs to know that information to sort of get what I'm doing, or to get like the full experience I'm hoping for them to have. Um, Sometimes it's just self-indulgent. Like, I just really liked that line. And I think the Catullus quote in the Deerhoof Gunrack poem, that's an indulgent one. I don't think you really need to get the quote from Catullus because he's mentioned in the poem and kind of described there. But I think the Waffle House Index one, I want people to know that FEMA has used whether Waffle Houses are open in a given region as an actual indicator of like disaster severity, like that's a real thing. And so, but it's not something that I expect everyone to know. And so I want to put a little epigraph on that poem to let people know that because it's important to me that they know that that's a true, real thing. And so I think about like the title space and everything that sort of precedes the poem as being like kind of like priming the pump for the poem. It sort of gives the reader information that hopefully they need or that I think they need to navigate the poem as successfully as possible. Um, and so like sometimes that can be like expository information, like some kind of like who, what, when, where sort of thing. Sometimes it can be like an emblematic phrase, like from the poem itself, so that we know when we get to that moment in the poem, like that's the important thing. Sometimes it might even be something kind of explanatory that, tells us at least implicitly sort of what the poem means. Like I think that's dangerous, but that's kind of permissible to do as well. And I think that, when I'm titling poems, I'm trying to think about, trying to imagine a reader's experience of the poem and what would be sort of most necessary for them to navigate the poem. And I think the epigraph can be part of that as well. Like
Mhm.
the way I sort of frame it as an analogy sometimes is like the poem is like a dense forest and the reader is going into it and I'm standing on the outside of the forest and like what am I going to tell them before they walk in, right? Like
Mhm.
am I going to say like look for the big rock and turn left there? Or am I going to say, follow this particular trail? Or am I going to say like whatever I'm going to tell them about like how to navigate the forest or what to pay attention um, to give them what I think at least is the sort of best journey through that experience. So that's how I think about titles, is like sort of like how are they going to assist or sometimes even thwart the reader's experience of the poem in a way that is productive and hopefully interesting. And the epigraph is part of that usually, but sometimes it is honestly just self-indulgent. It was a thing that I thought was interesting and I wanted to include it.
Yeah. So are these choices like the last decision you make for a poem is what to call it and whether or not to include something like that?
I've gone sort of both directions with it. I've definitely written poems where I had like lists of titles in a notebook. I know like Wallace Stevens did this too, where I just have like lists of titles and then I write poems for the titles. And sometimes you have to write 4 or 5 poems until you get the poem that fits with the title. But I think most of the time I'm coming up with the title after the fact. Because I think it's just easier to know sort of what the title needs to do after you've written the poem. But sometimes it's fun as a challenge to sort of write the poem and then try to figure out, or write the title and then figure out what the poem is going to be that fits it. That can be sort of hit or miss, but yeah, I've sort of done it both ways.
Yeah, definitely can see that. Well, let's wrap up with one last poem, and this is a newer poem. I assume probably from the manuscript that Dolorimetry is in as well, so we're sort of re-entering that world, maybe.
Yeah. All right. This one is called The Boy. There was nothing he couldn't do. He balanced a pistol on the tip of his nose, and the classroom burst with applause. He ordered a drone strike on the house of the teenager who'd ruled him too short to ride the local roller coaster. Now, said his father as he backed out of the boy's room. The boy sharpened a screwdriver on a rock and walked around the old town square with it, glinting in his fist. The world was all bulging tires and soft throats. He could recite the alphabet in 4 languages. He knew all the state capitals, and he'd chosen what the new capitals would be after the war was over. He stayed out past his curfew, walking under the fuzzy glow of the subdivision streetlights. The night unrolled itself for him like a wet tongue. When he came to a house he liked, he walked inside. I want to play with your dog, he said to the people living there. We don't have a dog, they said, and he took out his screwdriver. No one could do anything about him. Why would they? Everyone loved him. He'd made it illegal not to love him.
Yeah, a great last line. And that was The Boy, a newer poem by Nick Lantz. Nick, thanks so much for being a guest. It's been such fun, learn your work in more depth, getting to know you too. Really glad you came on and to share your work.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Yeah. So that was Nick Lantz. You can find Nick's most recent book, which was The End of Everything and Everything That Comes After That. Find that and all of his other 4 books before that at nick-lantz.com. That's nick-lantz.com. nick-lantz.com. Find all his work there and check out The End of Everything and Everything That Comes After That, especially. All right, we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem about a time you couldn't keep the correct time straight. Include at least one temporal shift. That is your prompt for this week. And now, this is the invited prompt line, so how it works is if you had to submit your poem by Sunday night at midnight last night to have Katie consider it for the invited prompt lines, and she would have emailed you. She picks about 10 poets every week, tries to keep it a mix of poems, responses, styles, lengths, subject matter, has some new faces on, along with the familiar faces, and she'll invite about, up to 10 people or so, depending on length, to the prompt lines. So if you have been invited, check your email and join us now. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. I'm here with our creative editor, prompt lines editor, and my wife, Katie Dozier. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing great. I really enjoy that discussion. My favorite part of hearing a poet speak that's like an especially great at metaphor poet is how casually they use metaphors when they're just talking.
Especially when they say, oh, metaphors don't come off casually.
I know, and then he said them so casually, and I was like, you were wrong, sir. You're proof. Yeah, but they always do, too. It's amazing. It's like I love getting to hear from poets that are particularly great at metaphor, because not every poet, that's not everyone's strength.
Yeah, there are a lot of different things that go into a poem, and the metaphoric mind is one of them, but not everything.
Not
sure.
everything.
So the prompt for this week was to write about a time you couldn't keep the correct time straight. So what did you do with that, Katie?
So I went very literal, I would say, which makes it sound like it's going to be a plain speaking poem, but it's not really.
Okay.
Though the title gives you hope that it will be.
Okay, warehouse.
Yes. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Okay.
Okay. It's a Hayden. Warehouse. Every moment is a pile of papers. I am this room full of white, teetering columns. As you pluck one from the top of a ladder, the single sheet plinkos itself down through the hours, which slips into the yawns of years. Remember when these checkerboard floors were nearly bare? No memories to sweep, but now we watch the pages turn back to trees. Return to cinder, destination unknown.
Dozier coup to cap off that, Hayden. And that's a really interesting one, Katie, because it's one of those, speaking of, like we're talking to Nick about, and the edge of understanding of what's going on in the poem. So can you share a little bit more about what the source was for this?
I was just thinking about how memories, every time you have an interaction in life, having gotten in an argument with somebody who's not Tim during my real life, how it recalls every argument you've ever had with anyone anytime you're actually in an argument. And so I was thinking about that as I had my little 15-minute writing block today. And I thought about, I just had this image pop into my head of all these piles of paper and how really you're just calling on a category. And the older you get, the more there is to draw from too. So kind of what I was thinking about.
Yeah, well,
and then we saw that huge warehouse or whatever on our spring break. So,
yeah, really interesting. I was wondering if that was sourcing this poem was a little more difficult than it starts sometimes. It's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, and that's a really cool haiku at the end too. It's one of those like how was that never seen as a haiku before? It's a really neat poem.
Thanks.
All right, so that was Katie's poem, and then mine was this. I went back to the alliterative verse. Yeah, this little project. So I've got maybe 25 or 30 of these poems now, and playing with it. We'll see.
That's a lot of them. I didn't realize you had that many. That's great.
Maybe it's an exaggeration. I don't know. That's how long the document
I wasn't trying to doubt you. It sounds believable.
Okay. So here's watch. Oops, let me get rid of that. Okay, watch. Time trembles in its tiny track, the way a watch wavers among the junk in a dark drawer. Not quite dead, the battery in its belly barely holds a charge, but still chugs along like a challenge to the notion of never. The nascent needle of a second's hand hangs on the high bar of its mission to move. Too meek a force won't guide the gears into the next groove, so it never ratchets. It rises and releases like the bought breath that barrels through to your father's belly in a far-off phone. It's a matter of time, they tell you, truly. But time is tedious. It tricks and talks. It shudders and shivers even as it shoves you through the angry arc of its awful arrow. You inhale, and in that insatiable instant, your answer is added to the autobiography. That was watch.
That's nice. You always scroll up to the beginning, and I always want a line from the end.
Okay, watch.
I always have. But I love the time.
The title.
The time is that's true. The time is tedious. It tricks and talks. That's cool. I feel like I would misread that so much if I was in charge of reading my own poem and that was it. But I really like that tricks and talks because you're tricking instead of ticking. That's nice.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So that was watch. And now let's see. Let's go first to Christiana Doucette.
Hi.
Hi. It's so good to see you.
Yeah,
I'm really glad you're here
good
with
to
us
see you.
tonight.
Yeah, definitely,
Thank you.
Christiana. Yeah.
Yeah. Today has been a pretty good day. I shared on the prompt group my grandma got a terminal diagnosis of cancer last Monday. And so I wrote this poem. I think the very first poem that I ever read for the Rattlecast was about my dad's aneurysm. And I think I've referenced it in maybe one other poem since then. But I think all of the stuff with Grandma like opened up that to write about this time. So mine's longer. My grandma's doing okay right now. She got home and like she's on hospice. She has a brain tumor. And my mom told her, she was like, hey, don't go out. If you need to go anywhere, I'll drive you. And my grandma did not respond. So I was talking on the phone with my mom. She's telling me this, and my grandma calls her. Sure enough, my grandma drove herself over to pick up her prescription because she does not want to give up her freedom. We're like, Grandma, you have, I don't know. So I'm doing okay today.
Yeah.
And it just reminded, I think it was that like unexpected family that made it okay for me to write this time. So this one's called Obad Before Dawn on the Day of Your Brain Surgery. Groggy in the hard chair beside the hospital bed, I hear you stir. Your breath changes at here, not home with your wife. With me, not her by your side. Outside, the stars are melting snow. They swirl in the parking garage spotlights. Each time you wake, I do not know if you will know I am your daughter. Where you are, the day, the time. The slow brain bleed faceting your mind churns moments in gray butter. Your hand closes on the tube in your nose and I scoot to the bed, fold your fingers in mine. Dad. You squint, sleep sand, then tears. I squeeze your palm gently, careful to avoid the bandaged back where the IV drips its cold diamonds in vain. Do you know where you are? A half nod. Hospital, you mumble. The whites of your eyes catch the silver sliver of the neural ICU door. I pull them back to me. Do you know who I am? Your face crumples. I shiver, wondering if I am too much. Estranged daughter in a strange room in the strained dark. But you squeeze my hand. My daughter. Love you. I stroke the top of your wrist, praying this stroke won't steal you, and you calm. There in the near night, dread plays in the shadows of your face. Childhood fears slip from the corners of your mouth unfiltered. Terrors about good and evil, the coming knife, the way the aneurysm across the cold tiles. All your shames have risen to the surface like curdled cream. I skim them away, tell you what both of us know I can't know, that it will be okay, that when the sun rises, you will be the you we've always known. We both know I am horrible at lying. So I ask if you want me to read the Bible to you, and when you do, I start in Matthew, and you sink into the careful cadence of the King James, peace on your face. Your breath steadies. But if I pause too long, the channel eddies, narrows, your knuckles whiten, and I wish I could read forever here in the dim before dawn, that I could press the stars back into the felt sky, that you could be Jairus' daughter, the centurion's servant, Lazarus ready to remove the gray's clothes and go out whole and healthy. I want to be Scheherazade, whose stories turned one night into 1,000, into 1,000,000. I want to rewrite life into seen and heard for both of us. I want the harsh light slicing over the horizon, scraped back into the butter dish, shoved to the back of the fridge where nothing else can go bad, where the surgeon never comes in his scrubs, where I pull the thin blanket back over your feet and sing the songs we used to sing together again.
Well, Christiana, it's such a beautiful poem. It almost feels like I don't want to cheapen it by talking about some of the craft reasons I love it so much, but they're so in there. I mean, like, I love too how there's so many elements where you mentioned something or a version of something 3 different times, which I think is really nice with the Bible narrative that is running through, and it almost feels like a braid too. And then when you kind of interrupt yourself to talk about the stars so many times, I think it's really gorgeous, and we can just feel like we're right there with you in that moment. And I think it's absolutely profound that you chose to write this week and chose to share it with us and say that you wanted to read it live for everybody too is really inspiring to me personally and to everybody else, I'm sure too. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for letting me read it out loud. I really appreciate it. And
Well,
I've been looking forward to hearing all the poems all weekend. So
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, thanks so much.
We'll be thinking
Christiana.
of you and your family.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was Christiana Doucette with Obeyed Before Dawn on the day of your brain surgery. Next, let's go to John Arthur.
This is a
Hello, how's it
real
going?
plot twist to go.
Well, I don't know the plot.
I know it's good. It's a good. I think we could use a little turn after that. Hey, John, how are you doing?
Doing well, and Christiana's poem was beautiful, and actually just happened to be reading Rattle number 91 and saw another one of her poems in there, and that was a great poem as well. So
Yeah, definitely. I love that poem too, and an excellent issue. It's still somehow one of the standouts. So yeah, she's a great writer.
yeah. So yeah, this is very different. It's literally called Ars Poetica, so I don't really know. I don't really know what else to say besides that.
It does feel like there should be like a whole, like it should be its own genre. You know, like how are we only hearing this term for the first time?
Let's make an anthology.
I don't know.
All right, so I guess I'll jump right in. Ars Poetica. I am in the bathroom with the fan and the sink on. So for just a minute, or maybe it was an hour, I can't hear my toddlers screaming or my wife screaming at them to stop screaming, reading the collected poems of Ron Padgett, which is full of poems where he does things like sit in the bathroom so he can't hear his toddlers screaming while reading a book of poems and describing it all in plain language and making you feel like maybe God is in the bathroom, hiding from us, reading a book of poems written by a celestial being who is hiding in a bathroom the size of a universe to avoid hearing God screaming through those too thin walls, because even God's God cheaped out on her mortgage so that she wouldn't have to take that promotion she knew would leave her with little time to read poems in the bathroom, and that maybe time is a big fat lie, and we're all sitting in bathrooms at all times in all possible universes, forever reading poems and spitting out imitations of our universe's Ron Padgett, who of course can go by any name, and damn it, even across the strange incalculable distances of this twisted instance of space-time, I can still hear the screaming, but at least now I have no idea what they're saying.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, John, I found this poem really engaging to read also because like I didn't expect you to bring up Ron Padgett, for example, and like the amount that you committed to going full circle in this poem. It gave the effect, may I say, of a lovely flush, water circling around. So I really did like it, and the turn to religion was really interesting, and I did not see coming also. So you don't expect that with an old Ars Poetica, not known for him.
I'll spare you all the details, but I actually did write this in the bathroom. So
thanks for answering the question I dare not ask. Thank you. I've been wasting my time, I guess. All right. Thanks, John. Good to see you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yeah, that was John Arthur with Ars Poetica.
Ars Poetica. I feel like Brian O'Sullivan will be very amused by that title out there.
I think so.
Yeah.
Let's go next to Carla Schwartz.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
Hey, glad to have
Hey,
you, Carla.
Carla.
Um,
Carla, am I allowed to say that I also enjoyed your Haibun that
oh,
you
thank you.
submitted this week? But I have to say, I think this is a really strong haiku.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Katie, so much. It is short. It's okay, I'll read it twice.
Yes.
But here we go. Here we go. Camper van, mice in the drawers, forgot to have kids.
Yeah.
I'll do it one more time. Camper van, mice in the drawers, forgot to have kids.
So Carla, I think that is just great and just very different from any haiku I've ever read before. And I was curious if, because, your haibun was on a related topic, is this something that happens to you? Like you write a haibun and then you get a haiku that's, I was interested in the relationship between that writing experience for you.
Actually, the haiku came first.
Oh, how interesting.
And the haiku and the haibun I really love,
Yeah, it
It's
was really good too. Yeah, she did the
which is
Dozer Coup thing again
Yes,
too. I remember. It
yes,
was really
yes,
good
yes.
too. But
Yeah.
I just
So,
yeah.
But this one came first.
Yeah. Mhm. Well, that's really interesting. Thanks, and both were great. So thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
sharing
the
this.
prompt. Thank you so much.
Great to see you,
And,
Carla.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Carla. It was Carla Schwartz with a haiku there, Camper Van. Let's go next to a first-time caller, Edward Wilson. You can unmute and we'll hear you, Edward.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Wow.
Thanks so much
Good,
for
good,
joining
good.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's great fun. Great fun.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, especially because you have what sounds like the world's coolest voice.
Definitely.
Apparently. So
But I'm hiding behind the
for sure.
bathroom wall here, right?
so I really enjoyed reading your poem, and I was hoping,
Thank
do you want to start out by just sharing it for us, and then we'll talk a little bit?
Sure. The poem is the name of the poem is Mr. Barry. He was my grade school band director, and he was kind of an Ichabod Crane fellow, but a bit dawny and severe, not really the comic one.
Right.
And the poem is accurate. It's exactly accurate. Mr. Barry, we were what, 12, sixth grade? After school, tryouts for the band. Freddie and I wove through jumbled chairs, the music stands, tables with magic shells of instruments, stood before his desk. I was first, said drums. He produced the sticks and practice pads, raised his and said, do this. Rapped a rhythm out. I did, he did, I did, we did, and did it once again. Handed the sticks to Freddie, said, play the cornet to me. Knew long before I did there was no time I could keep.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So I love multiple things about this poem. The first I have to say is the rhythm within it, particularly when you do I did, he did, I did, we did. That feels completely, like you're playing the drums in front of us, which is really great. And then the turn, to it being a bigger commentary on time and everything right at the very end, I thought was really brilliant too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It surprised me.
That's always a good sign, right? It definitely
Yeah.
is. I always think it's really
and-
fun when somebody pops back into your life that you haven't thought of for a
Right,
while in a poem, right?
And I did play the cornet.
Well, that's great. Well,
I think he needed a cornetist, right?
yeah. Very much. Well,
So, Edward,
Thank
where are you
you.
calling from? We forgot to ask.
From Augusta, Georgia.
Ah,
oh, nice.
great. Well, so glad you joined us. Hope you
Yes.
come back sometime soon.
Thank you.
And thank you for
Great to be here.
downloading Zoom just for us. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
well, I'm sorry. I'll get the video one of these days.
Hey, one step at a time. We were glad to hear from you.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Edward.
Thanks a lot, really.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that was Edward Wilson
Yes.
with Mr. Barry. All right, and now we're going to go to Molly House.
Hi.
Hi, Molly.
Hey, Molly, great to see you.
It's so good to be here. I'm really happy to be here. And I want to thank you for encouraging people to use formal structures because I have never tried to do it before. And I spent the last couple of weeks playing with pantoums, and this is my first sonnet.
Oh, very cool.
It's called Cheating Time, or maybe Cheating Time. I can keep time, but hardly straight. Like Emily's truth, I tell it slant. I tilt it till it makes me late. When I try to write and find I can't, words fall through clumsy fingers. I lose track of minutes tick. I search for meaning, sound that lingers, for heart, but also words that click. I tell my family I need to pray. I steal the minutes, return them bent. I lie and steal to claim my way. Wrong, but realer than time I spent in earlier years without a poem to stretch time and deliver me home.
Well, great music in that for
I
sure. Like
know.
the natural ear for it's hard to do end stopped rhyme and make it
Yeah.
feel smooth and natural
Right.
most of the way through.
I couldn't believe your note that you said this was your first, metered sonnet. I was like, whoa, that's really impressive. Yeah. So have you written more since then? Are you like inspired to write more in meter in general?
I want to try some more. Yeah.
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 Well, I can see
I
why.
like some of the things I've heard here, from other poets, and it's been inspiring.
Oh, well, that's great. And I love the end too, especially. I think we've had a lot of great endings so far in the invited prompt lines tonight, but this one definitely is. And I love poems that make you just feel more in love with poetry, and us getting to read this and really relate to it so much. I think all of us was really a nice experience, and I can relate very hard to this one.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, Molly. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. That was Molly Howes with Cheating Time.
Or cheating time.
Cheating Time.
It can be
Anybody wanna
both.
say
Yeah,
it?
she said it both. I liked it both. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. All right, let's go next to Bishwishit Mishra.
Hey, Tim and Caddy.
Hi,
It's great to
Biz.
see you.
Thanks for having me.
That's good to see. Sometimes when I see you, though, it's like I feel like it's 2 years ago when you're on every year. It feels like we go back in time because your office is the same and you look the same.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. It's just that a lot of things have changed. I mean, in the sense that I literally took off for a year. So it did good to me in a way, but it also did something bad. Like I find it hard to write to prompts. I mean, with whatever skill I have, limited skills, but still I find it hard because I was like a freelancer. I became a free-ranging chicken. Kind of. I can go anywhere. I didn't care. Now you find it hard. The mind doesn't work that way. So,
Yeah.
but
I think you'll get
sometimes-
back into it. I have faith, although it is very
Yeah.
funny to picture you as a free-ranging chicken. So at least we got that out of it.
But I try to write something. I mean, small or little, or good or bad doesn't matter. But I try to at
Yeah.
least keep that part alive.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's important. I liked everything that tonight's guest was talking about with kind of freeing yourself up and not putting these restrictions on ourselves that can keep us from writing. I thought he had a lot of great points on that. Yeah.
Oh, he was so good. I mean, the best part I felt I noted there, he was talking about all these grave, serious issues, and he was so calm.
Yeah.
And you can see that tone in his poem. It's not didactic. He's not telling you to do something, or he's
Right.
not lecturing, but he's got that strong points. But it's just you won't even realize you're hit by a truck.
That's well said.
It's that kind of poem, right?
Yeah. That's very well said, Biz. Yeah.
It was so good. Okay. I have a poem called Parallel. I mean, that's basically Johannes Berg who developed this. It's a very well-known haiku poet, but he writes very experimental stuff, and he has a magazine called The Other Bunny. So he developed this, and there's a book. It's available on Haiku Foundation. It's called Noah's Eggs. I mean, he says we talk about us at a particular point in time, like you have that aha moment or something, but it's very rare. I mean, it's a lot of things are going on at the same time. You're experiencing multiple things, so it's really very rare. You will just focus on. So maybe he's probably developed two sides flowing at the same time. I mean, you can have more sides. So I use that to, I mean, this is actually, I wrote when it was happening in the bed. So I
Oh,
didn't do
wow.
much to it, except I tweaked the last one to tie into your prompt.
Well, thank
And
you
it
for
was there.
that.
Yeah, I was struggling with that. I wanted that line, but I was not able to fit in. But that's one thing the prompt did to me. So I said, okay. So
Sounds
it's
like you
called,
wrote a prompt poem to me there, Biz.
I tried to go. I mean, you're best people in my life in poetry. I can tell you, Kim and you. So a team and you, and if I could write something to make you happy,
Aw, well,
would
thank
love to do
you.
that. But it's called Parallel. Wake up in the middle of the night, which is not the middle of night, but 2 hours into dreaming. Reworking the dream in the bed, an extension of the book before bed, the daylights saved, not from sleep. So you can read in other ways too if you want.
Do you want to read it in one other way for us?
I mean, not all parallel haikus read like that, but this
Yeah,
one you can.
this one does. Yeah, right.
Wake up, reworking in the middle, the dream of the night in the bed, which is an extension, not the middle of the book, up to night, before bed. But the daylights, 2 hours saved into dreaming, not from sleep.
I really like that, like having read it both too, because it gives you, like reading it that way gives you more of the sense of like, that's like the dream version of the poem kind
Yes.
of. I thought it was really interesting and how we're like
Yeah,
parallel
it's
to our
like,
dreams.
yeah, right. It's like the perspectives will give you a depth of the time. Like you think about your childhood, good experiences that, oh, it was so short. And you think of bad experiences so long. But it also, if you read it the other way, it's like the whole, continuity of cause and effect. So you don't know. Now
Yeah.
the time becomes a factor because you think of a childhood when it was happening, it may not have been not pleasant, but now when you look at it, you're getting yelled at by your dad. You have a fond memory. You write in a poem,
Right.
so that's probably how it works.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed this, and thanks for the excuse to look more at this form too, because to me this is like the next level of a braided Hayden, right? That actually when it's the kind of braid that reads through with the lines too.
Yes.
Like to write this, I think this would be very challenging and something I want to try to do. So thanks for that too.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
It's
Because I was doing
okay.
cool stuff with the short
Yeah, he
forms
sure
in
is.
particular.
Good to
Yeah,
see
thanks,
you,
Chris.
Biz.
Great to see
Thank
you.
you. Have a good night. I'll be on the other side of the world now,
Great.
watching it on YouTube because I can read it there. That's why I
Because you're a
love it.
free range chicken. Thanks, Biz.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay, good night.
Yeah, it was Bishop Mishra with Parallel. And last but certainly not least, let's go to Mary Lisa D. Diminishes. Hey, Mary
Hi,
Lisa.
everybody.
Hi,
Hi.
Mary Lisa.
Yeah, great to see
Good
you.
to see everybody. Visual, that also was a great use of negative space there, which kind of echoes the last poetry space.
Well, thank you, Mary
episode.
Lisa. That was very kind, and that's an excellent point. Yeah, it was so much about
Yeah.
using the negative space.
I enjoyed that. Whatever it was, what was it called? What kind of haiku was that called?
I don't even, it's named after the form, which is, I don't know. Biz, could you tell us again?
Parallel, I think you said.
Parallel,
Yeah, parallel.
yes.
Is it
Parallel.
just that's the name of
Yeah.
the form too? Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
I will post. There's a link on Haiku Foundation. That book is
Yeah.
available. It's called Noah's Eggs.
Right.
It's got beautiful poems there. I'll share it on the. Do you want me to share it on the YouTube or
Yeah,
Prompt
you
Yeah,
Lines?
Great.
sure. You can
Yeah.
put it in the Promptlines group too, because I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
look
That
up
would be
the.
nice.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah,
Great.
sure.
Great.
Thank
yeah,
you.
thanks.
Thank you, Vish.
Thanks, Mary Liz.
Okay.
Mary Lisa,
Hey, good
you
to see you. Good to see you. Thank you.
You too.
I'll mute myself.
Mary Lisa, you have a super powerful poem for us tonight. And I have to say, it's been a night of being glad that we can make time for longer than a page poems. And yours is definitely a poem that I can't see being less than a page. And you know what that means for me.
Yes. it's funny because I read it to my husband today, and he did say, you can't really leave anything out of that. So, and
Yeah.
I said, oh, that's a great compliment.
Yeah.
So thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I had a hard time reading it this morning. So, okay, here I go.
Oh, you'll do great. We're right here with you.
Thank you so much. Reflections on reading the book White Fragility. The ocean snarls. The gardens lose a minute of light each day. Time devours notions I held as I released my infant into its infinite arms. That we would not be divided by time, like time, not be broken down, action by action, memory by memory. Marked grudges sparked by new conflicts and old grievances. Grim and ghostly reconciliations listed in the ledgers of our minds. Will I lose him entirely, my son, my black son who grew beneath my ignorant but willing to learn white skin? The road to hell isn't paved with good intentions, only good intention without action, maybe. Will I lose my son in places that cycle and mimic the shapes of the moon? One sliver of white left just for me, enough light to admit I exist. I've never been beneath his skin. I know I can't know the depth of his discomfort or his pain. How deep, how widespread, how intense. And yet, yes, I speak in my own defense, as she predicted I might, when one white woman wrote, all white women are fragile, innately racist. That we shouldn't cry if a black man dies, unless we're out of sight of black women. I wonder, does this include my husband, my son? Where is she from? Another planet? She advises I can't ask a black friend anything about being black, but how would I know how to twist my son's hair into dreads without the help of his grandma, who showed me the way? How could the white advice writer see everyone as placed in cardboard shoeboxes, each apart and separated by color, placed on shelves? I want to say, girl, take back your book, your fence, your wall, your locked gate. You don't know our history, only your own. You haven't had the pleasure of sitting to drink tea while chatting with Granny, whose granny was raped by a sharecropper. You've never been forced from a shop, refused an apartment, once your child appeared from behind you. Have you prepared in advance for the worst when your child takes long drives at night just for the freedom, maybe to play music and sing out loud or think out the tensions of his life? Yes, I'm angry at what you write, but I'm more furious with time, its distance. I think time, take back your rust, your grease buildup, your dust, your death. But take your time about it. I need more of you. I despise your wreckage, but love my son, grown, still cradled in your arms. I love the gardens you allow and the ocean. My cats need tending. I try to keep up, scrub the rust, wipe the dust, clear the grease smears, and the ink of books by self-proclaimed experts trying to blot out the last slice of light from the moon. I want to rise too.
Aw. Mary Lisa, that was just, it's such a powerful poem. I thank you too for writing it and giving me insight to something I do not know much about. And I mean, the empathy that you have in the poem and trying to, to navigate a book that's saying things that, are very hurtful to you personally without like becoming attacking and showing us the empathy that book sounds like it lacks too, I think is really beautiful. So
thank you so much. It means so much to me that I was able to share this with you and with the other listeners tonight. So much.
Thanks so much. So much, emotional authenticity.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love all the use of repetition, particularly on the second page. And it gives this sense of like really building steam, like the poem gets faster and faster as you go. And I think that, is in a longer poem, something that really keeps us engaged and interested. And the rhythm is reflected in your writing too in that. And, I think that this is a poem too that like, it needed kind of a slower start to allow us to fully get into it. So the longer length helped a lot in that way too. And I love your maximalism, and it is shining in this poem. So
I have to say, I love your explanations of why you choose the poems. And I was looking so forward to hearing you explain why you chose this poem for tonight. So thank you so much for that. And also thank you for the prompt, because I was looking for ways into like talking about certain topics, and your prompts always help. They always help.
Oh,
so
I'm
thank
so glad.
you so much.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Mary Lisa. And I love just getting to see you because you're so bright and shining and wonderful and authentic. So also nice to just get the chance to see you again. So great to see you.
Same. Okay,
so
good
much,
night.
Mary Lisa.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, it was Mary Lisa D. Diminishes with reflections on reading the book White Fragility. All right, and let's see. So that's going to wrap up the invited prompt lines for tonight. Let's close out with a couple haiku. So what'd you do with your coup, Katie?
I will remember when it is put on the screen before me. Okay. Oh, yes. So we're at a botanical garden in Dallas where we took the kids to spring break last week. And as you can imagine, the kids' favorite tree, particularly Lizzie, who's obsessed with dogs, is the dogwood.
Yeah, beautiful this time of year, yeah.
The silence of the dogwood's bark.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks. I got to share it with Lizzie. I think this is a haiku she'll get behind.
Definitely, yeah. She'll be a fan of that. Very cool, yeah. Well, and that was in Dallas we went on a little road trip during spring break with the kids. And, Dallas, the Trinity River runs through it, Yeah. And I don't know if you saw, there's an apartment complex that we had to drive by getting out of the Airbnb every time. And it made me do a little double take every time. So this is my haiku. Trinity Green, my 15 milliminutes of fame.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, because it was this pretty miscellaneous looking apartment complex, and it had giant Instagram-y block letters in the center that said "Explore Trinity Green."
I know, and every time I thought it was talking to me.
Well, apparently it was. It was talking to you, Tim.
I guess so. All right, so that is my haiku this week. That's the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. To our guest, Nick Lantz, to Katie Dozier, who's always such a pleasure being here. And now next week's prompt is going to be what, Katie?
We are going to, well, it looks like a paragraph there.
It does.
I wrote.
Copied and pasted. So
Thank you. Yeah, I know. That's on me. Pick an obscure holiday that occurs during the next week and write a poem that celebrates accordingly. Include which holiday and the date in the notes of your submission, because I do want it to be there are a lot of these. I looked it up before I said it, and I limited it to a week literally because at least on one site I was on, there are probably 40 or something within the span of the next week. But I do want it to be one that's not 3 Tuesdays ago it was hot dog day or something.
Make it
we
really
have
this
enough.
week.
Make it really this week. I think it'll make it more fun. Bonus points if you write it on the day itself.
Ah, very good. Okay, well, that's the prompt for this week.
Yeah.
Pick an obscure holiday that occurs during the next week and write a poem that
and
celebrates
obscure holiday
accordingly.
too. I just want to say it's
not St. Patrick's Day.
No, that is not an obscure holiday. Like someone no one would actually know about unless they were really in the industry or whatever.
Okay, well,
this is going to require some googling.
Okay.
Everybody's up for it.
Well, thanks so much.
Great.
Looking forward to it. All right, and next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be David Mason. Now, David originally appeared, I think, on episode 64, maybe, somewhere way back then. He had a new and selected poems book out then. Now he has a new book, Cold Fire, 5 years later. David Mason, one of the great formal-leaning poets, has a wonderful book, Ludlow, one of my favorite books of narrative poetry to come out in a very long time. He's from Australia, so it's going to be the next day for him, but it's the regular time for us. Monday, March 23rd, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, with David Mason, Rattlecast 335. Hope to see you there. Have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.